So feel free to pass some questions into the Q&A, and and I'll do my best to answer them the best I can. So thank you, Judy, for your comment there, that you are so aware of the research benefits of daily life, wheelchairs, driving modifications as an OT. This is helpful us moving forward. Yeah, so it's a really good point there by Judy. And the research into modification and wheelchairs has really had a positive impact on disciplines like occupational therapy, physiotherapy, which traditionally and medically may not have had the focus of spinal research. Yeah, so the question, how do we sign up for a trial? Yes, that's a really interesting question, and that's the question that we're going to discuss more in webinar 2. So if you're interested in trials, and I'll speak to this from an Australian point of view, that researchers do post their trials on websites. In Australia, it's clinicaltrials.gov.au. I'm willing to share those websites on the SRI consumer websites. We actually have links to websites where you can sign up for trials, but in Australia you probably want to go to Australian clinicaltrials.gov.au and just search through relevant trials. How do researchers decide which questions to answer? Well, that's also an interesting question. So I guess part of that would go down to the type of researcher that they are and their speciality. And then they go through the process of, go through the process of ethics and what have you. So then it's really goes to their speciality, and quite broad. So there's a lot of research being done. They then have to go through and get funding. So then their idea has to be relevant enough and has to have an impact for them to then answer that question. Why does research take so long to be conducted? And that's a really important question. So we went through the method. Some research that takes longer, what's known as longitudinal studies. So where that research might take 10 years. So I mentioned an intervention or an observation. Sometimes they need to look at a longer term process, or that the intervention may take a while. So I guess part of that as well is depending on the intervention. Depending on the intervention, they may need time for that process to evaluate, but then they need time to actually analyze the data and go through that. So that's probably why research takes a while, that it's not rushed, that it's not necessarily, and they will need to go through the process to make sure that the research is conducted properly. What areas of SCI are being researched by nurses in Australia? I'm not sure exactly at the moment, but if the person asking that question wants to email me, I can look into that for them. Why do you need research to make collaboration? Why do you need collaboration to make research successful? It's a really good question. So sometimes a researcher may specialize in a certain area and may have a point of view, or or see things a certain way. By working together with other people, you get different voices and you get different ideas. And the way I see spinal research is that I see spinal research as a global collaboration. So even though research may be conducted in, let's say, Canada, may impact someone like myself in Australia, but the collaboration is really to pool resources and to share points of view and make the research more relevant. Do you see? a role for general disability research, i.e. attitudes towards disability, whether to report whether you have a disability on a job application? That's a really great question. And I mentioned before around the social model of disability, and that's the sort of research that looks into and attitudes towards. Now, whether to report you have a disability on a job application, there has been research done by that. For example, in my own studies, I saw some research done in America, which looked at that very question, where they had a person with a physical disability, they had a person with intellectual disability, and they had a person with no disability apply for the, and they were accounting jobs, and they looked at the responses, and they found that yes, there were significant differences in the rates of response. So yes, that area of work, area of disability is really important, and that's sort of a lot of the change. And to be fair, there's probably a lot of that research, that social research, that doesn't get reported in the media compared to the medical side. What is the most popular research topic in SCI? I probably wouldn't be able to answer that because there's so many areas, and that's really an individual preference. I guess the most talked about is the curative and the regenerative, so things like stem cells. But whether that's the most popular, I'm not necessarily sure that I can necessarily answer that. All right, so I'll just start wrapping up, but please feel free to send in some more questions and some more comments. So I would like to acknowledge our supporters for this webinar series. So the webinar series is supported by the Marian and E.H Flack Trust, as well as the John T. Reid Charitable Trust, and the Consumer Engagement Program is supported by the IOOF Foundation. We have another question, sorry. How do researchers balance the need to satisfy funding compared to their own interests of the community? That's an interesting question there. So their own interests, I guess, once again, they would have a speciality. It really depends on, so we speak about funding, the attitudes of the funding body and where they're receiving the funding from, whether it's a university or what have you. The justification, so as part of the process, the researcher would have to write a research proposal and outline the need for that research to be conducted. So that they would have to sort of, it's not just a matter of putting a question to a funding body, they then need to go through the process of justifying the impact and justifying the reason for the research to secure the funding. And then it's then determined by the funding body on whether that research is funded or not. So generally researchers are genuinely interested in the area that they're researching, but then they have to justify through research proposals on why that research needs to be funded, and then that's generally determined by a funding company. What about pediatric SCI research? I am aware that there is pediatric SCI research. I'm happy if that person wants to contact me directly, I'm happy to steer them towards some information, but I don't have any information firsthand. But I am aware that there is pediatric research. All right, so moving forward, so our next webinar sort of follows on from this, and we look at our role as the SCI community of how we can help shape SCI research, and it sort of goes into that question before about the needs of the community and how we as consumers living in the community can help shape research and ensure that research is dictated by what we need as a community. Once again, the link is there. So if you follow sri.org/webinars or scan the QR code, there is also on the landing page a subscribe button for the next webinar, as well as to be kept up to date with our consumer engagement program. So that's on the 17th of May, and feel free to register. Also feel free to contact me through the SRI website and the consumer engagement page if we need. And like I said, for those questions that I wasn't able to answer, please feel free to reach out and contact me as well. I'll be more than happy to get the appropriate answers or steer you in the right direction. So thank you for that today. If there's no further questions, I hope you've enjoyed that webinar, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.